Good morning, afternoon. Today's topic, cell transport, ways substances get in and out of the cell. Why does this even need to happen? Well, nutrients have to go into a cell, and waste has to be removed from the cell. The cell can't function without nutrients, and the cell can't function without too much waste. Some materials can't pass through the cell membrane. When this happens, it's called a semi-permeable membrane. Some things can get through and some things cannot. If they're small enough, they can get through, and if they're big, they can't. Passive transport means that there's substances that move through the cell membrane that don't need any energy. They just go. Like if you have a ball at the top of a ramp, you just let go and it rolls down the ramp. There's no energy required in making the ball go. Cell membranes do the same thing with small molecules. Two examples of passive transport are diffusion and osmosis, and we're going to go into more details on each of those. Diffusion is when molecules collide and they push away from each other. We know molecules collide because we learned this last year. And as they move and bump into each other, they move further and further apart. That movement from something concentrated and packed up together to moving farther away is called diffusion. Take my example of the lump of sugar. If we put a cube of sugar in water, then eventually the water and the sugar molecules bounce around enough that the sugar molecules break up and move further apart, and you end up with sugar diffused completely within the water, and you can't see the cube anymore. Movement always moves from a high concentration, squished together, to a low concentration, spread apart. Remember when Mom baked those cookies last week? Or you're wishing she did. You can smell the cookies from your bedroom, not just from the kitchen, because the molecules from the cookies bounce around and move throughout the house and diffuse into the air. The good news is the cookies are stronger smelling where they are, so you can follow your nose by the smell of the cookies and find your treat. So what's a concentration? That's the number of particles in a specific volume. If you have the same number of molecules and you make the container smaller, they're more concentrated. If you have the same size container and you change the number of molecules, you're changing the concentration. If we have a cell with 8 molecules in it, and there's 2 molecules outside the cell, those 8 molecules are bouncing around a whole lot, and some of them are going to move outside the cell, so that we have the same number on each side. We call that equilibrium. Movement of materials into and out of the cells is equal. It doesn't mean the molecules stop moving. They never stop moving. What it means is you have the same number of molecules going in as you have going out. So it's dynamic, it's movement, but it's still, most of the time, fairly equal. Osmosis is just a special kind of diffusion. So why did we have to give it a different name? Scientists do that. They give things special names when it's something really important. Osmosis is really important because your cells can't live without it. So diffusion of water across a cell membrane is osmosis. So if we have 8 molecules of water in the cell and 2 molecules of water outside the cell, some of those molecules inside are going to leave because it's too crowded and they need more space. As with all diffusion, it moves from high concentration to low concentration. That's why when we have a carrot in salt water, the carrot gets limp. The water leaves the carrot because there's more salt in the water outside the carrot, and there's not as much water outside the carrot as there is inside the carrot. So the water in the carrot leaves to join the water outside of it to help with all of those salt molecules that are hanging around. Osmosis is water passing easily across a cell membrane. So what does that mean? We don't need energy. It's still diffusion. It's still passive transport. Practice. Which way does the water go? Look at the diagram on the left. Do you have more molecules inside the circle or outside the circle? You're right. There's more inside the circle. So the water moves out of the circle. Look at the diagram on the right. Do we have more molecules inside the circle or outside the circle? You're right. We have more molecules outside the circle. So some of them are going to move in. Active transport is different than passive transport because of one thing. The molecules need energy to cross the cell membrane. There are proteins in the cell membrane that act as channels so that the molecules can move through when they're too big or when we have to push them the wrong direction. Often in active transport, molecules are moving toward high concentration. Sometimes they have to use active transport because they're just too big. Energy is needed to move substances across the cell membrane. This requires a transport protein. There are different kinds. We don't need to get into that until high school. But go back to our analogy of the ball at the ramp. Active transport is just like somebody having to push the ball back up the ramp. It'll go up the ramp, but it won't do it without energy from something else. Salt and glucose need help to move across the cell membrane because they're just too big, even though they're necessary. Here are the citations for all of the wonderful pictures you got to see today. Have a great day.